Mediation before a custody hearing. Let's talk about it. I just want to thank this user for bringing up this question because at first I didn't think I would have much to say, but I do. I have much to say about mediation. So first things first, I represented myself in custody court through the whole custody proceeding. I represented myself. My children's father had a lawyer. I was awarded primary custody of all three of our children. He got weekly supervised visits. Now this user asks, can you do a video on what to bring for a mediation? Now keep in mind, I'm in the state of Pennsylvania and my laws and guidelines may look different than yours. In Pennsylvania, we are not allowed to present evidence or bring forth any witnesses in mediation. You may bring notes or documents if you think they are relevant. However, the facilitator cannot treat mediation as if it is a hearing. The point of mediation is to come to a custody arrangement without the whole trial. They give you and dad an opportunity to hash this out together without evidence, without witnesses, just you guys and a facilitator. In Pennsylvania, lawyers are permitted to be in the room, but it's basically just a conference with you and him to try to come to a formal agreement. So unfortunately, you may not be able to bring anything or anyone into mediation. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you think about the severity of bringing your custody to a judge, like the seriousness of taking all decision making out of your hands and placing all decision making into the hands of a judge that doesn't know you, your children, or their father, that's very serious. So mediation can be a very good thing. Okay, I feel like I've gotten a little ahead of myself. So for those of you that don't know, when you or your child's father files for custody, this matter will not go straight to a judge. First, you will have a type of conference about it with yourself, your child's father, and a court-appointed facilitator, and they call this mediation. So like I said, it's a place where you can come to an agreement with your child's father without a judge and without a trial, but you can still bring up your concerns and you can talk about anything and everything related to the custody of your children in this room without the formality of a trial. I recommend still maintaining some sense of decorum because the facilitator will be taking notes. Don't go in there and cuss him out, you know what I mean? But you can verbalize concerns in this room. And after you verbalize your concerns and you talk about all the things you want to talk about, the facilitator can make a recommendation. After you guys say all the things you need to say, the facilitator may say, okay, well, it kind of sounds like you guys can come to an agreement right here. Would you like to do that? Or the facilitator may say, you know what, this sounds like you guys need a judge. Now, the facilitator does not have the authority that a judge has. So if you are looking for sole custody of your children, you're not going to get it in mediation. The facilitator does not have the authority to do that. The facilitator will listen to everything. The facilitator will take notes. The facilitator can make recommendations that they may hand to the judge. But at the end of the day, they have no real authority or decision making over your custody case. So I sat in mediation 2 times before I ultimately had a hearing. The first time I went, that was a complete mistake on my part. So the first time I had mediation, it had been 6 months since my children had seen or heard from their father. They were completely no contact for 6 months. And those babies were thriving. They were so happy. They were so regulated and well-rounded. They were just doing so well. And I knew going into mediation that I was not going to get a sole custody recommendation because their father is not bad enough on paper. So I knew that I was going to have to make some kind of a deal with him. And seeing how well my children were doing, all I could think about, all I could focus on was I need to make sure that they have as little exposure to their father as possible because every minute they spend with him is a minute that they're going to undo all the progress that they have made. And I was fucking right about that, but that's a whole other thing. So my first time in mediation, I didn't speak up. I didn't voice any of my concerns. I didn't bring up all the things that I should have. I just got him as little time with the kids as possible. signed it, and got the fuck out of there before anything escalated. This was a mistake. My children's father has a criminal record, a history of violence, and a history of abuse that is very well documented through the courts in our home county. In the state of Pennsylvania, any parent that has a history of abuse or a history of violence is automatically subject to supervised visits around their children. It's called Caden's Law. It's something that I'll talk about in a different video. I did not know this. The facilitator did not tell me this. I don't know if the facilitator was aware of his criminal record prior to our mediation, but I didn't speak up and I didn't know about Caden's Law. So he was, let's just call him Dusty, my kid's dad. Dusty was granted visitation, even though in our state, he is required to be supervised. The facilitator didn't handle that. I should have spoke up. So I didn't speak up. I got him 6 hours a week, signed on the dotted line, and they gave me this flimsy, this is 3 pages, this flimsy little custody agreement. This does not make me feel as if the well-being of my children is being looked after. 3 pages. I ultimately had another mediation and went to court. No, but so if you do go into mediation, don't be like me. Speak up and talk about all the things. Because in this packet, which could be longer for you, you can talk about visitation hours, overnight stays. You can talk about who's doing school pickup and drop-offs, who's doing doctor's appointments. You can talk about holidays. You can talk about exposure to extended family. You can go over all of those scary, hairy little details in mediation without a judge. And you can respectfully tell him about himself. But as I said, hold some sense of decorum. So first mediation, this didn't work out. 6 months later, had to refile for custody and go through another mediator. This one, I voiced all my concerns. I said all the things. I brought all the notes. Him and I had some words in front of the facilitator. Now in our first mediation, since we did come to an agreement, the facilitator did not have to enter their notes because we came to an agreement. So there was no record of anything that we talked about in that first one. But in the second one, since we could not come to an agreement and the facilitator ultimately did recommend that we have a hearing, there were notes sent over to the judge. So the facilitator took all the notes, wrote down their thoughts, and wrote down what they recommend happen to our custody case to the judge. They can give a judge the recommendation, but don't get scared because our facilitator wrote down a recommendation to the judge. The judge doesn't have to follow that recommendation. They can do whatever they want. And the judge did not follow the recommendation that I received, which I'm grateful for. So the facilitator in the second mediation listened to everything that I had to say and said, wow, yeah, you need to be standing in front of a judge for all of this. And then scheduled us a hearing, which bought me another almost 2 months of peace and quiet with my kids. So while you may not be able to present evidence or bring forth any witnesses, this room, mediation, this is where you say all the things a little more freely, a little more informally. You can display a little bit of emotion in this room without being called uncooperative. So before mediation, I just recommend that you write down all of your concerns, write down anything that you are willing to cooperate with, holidays, pickups, all that stuff. Write down your ideal custody arrangement. If you would like to leave that room with an arrangement with your child's father, get it all down and make sure the facilitator puts it all in writing too. If you're willing to share custody with him, but you don't want his mama watching them kids, get that in writing. And remember, stand up straight, keep your voice level, say all the things. Respectfully tell him all about himself. This may be your only chance to do it. Do it for your children.